Hello, my name is Dave Cummins, and we're here to talk about blue signal protection. While blue signal protection has been around for many years, we continue to see violations where people place themselves and others at risk. Blue signal protection isn't complicated, as long as you understand the core concept of positive protection. And that means that equipment can't be placed into your work area, whether on purpose or by accident. You are positively protected. And we see this also in other industries. We've all driven down the highway and saw the highway worker there doing road work. Many of them are struck every year and killed because they're not under positive protection. They're just using cones and flags. To be positively protected, you have to use concrete barriers that creates a zone of protection for the workers that will not allow a car to enter their work area. We use that same concept here with blue signal, but we do it through lining and locking of switches. Most blue flag violations are a result of a switch improperly lined. So it's very important that we all understand how to line, lock, and check a switch. The second piece of blue signal protection is the blue flag. Now, the purpose of a blue flag is to signal to others that we're working in the track. During nighttime hours or during inclement weather, the addition of a blue light is also required. Before you apply your lock to the switch, there's a few things to keep in mind because we've seen several violations because of these issues. First off, make sure there's some sort of a bar, a chain, or a mechanism that prevents the switch from being thrown after the lock's applied. That's very important. Secondly, once your lock is through and you think it's locked, be sure you give it a tug to be sure that it is locked. Because it's so important that we have the switches lined correctly, we want to make sure everybody understands the concept. So here's a way to visualize if you're unsure which way a track is lined. We're going to use a bar, and it's going to represent the flange of a wheel. And we're going to put it against the edge of the rail and slide it down the rail, and then whatever track you wind up into, that's the way the switch is lined. So let's see how this works. So as you can see, the switch is lined for the lead. Now that we've thrown the switch, let's see where we wind up this time. Now as you can see, we're lined for the track and not the lead. Okay, our switch is lined and locked, and our flag is applied, and we're ready to go to work. But before you do, take this moment and pause and ask yourself, am I sure that I have everything applied properly? You want to check your flag, and also look down and make sure that the switch is lined properly one last time. Okay, the final step before we can commence work is we have to communicate. We need to communicate with our workmate that our end is protected, and we need to wait to receive confirmation that the other end of the track is also protected. To do that, you communicate. CP Carmen. So after a switch is lined, locked, and checked, and your blue flag is applied with possible blue light, and you're ready to go to work, pause for a moment to ensure that everything is done properly. Is the switch indeed lined for the correct track? Taking this moment to ensure that things are done right before you communicate it with your partner will ensure that you are protected because your lives do depend on it. Now, there's a misconception about blue signal protection. People think that cars can't move while under blue signal protection, but that's not the case. We need to always be prepared for movement of the equipment, and it can be caused by applying air, releasing air, or releasing handbrakes, so always be prepared for movement. Prior to removing protection, you must first communicate with your coworkers. You need to be 100% sure that all workers are clear of the track before dropping protection. You want to also ensure that all the locks and all of the flags are down, especially those crossover switches. You don't want to leave any flag or lock applied before you leave the area. Because it's difficult to see what's going on out in a yard, we're going to use this model to help demonstrate how to apply blue signal protection properly. So what we have here is 4 tracks, 1 through 4, of an average yard. The buttons represent different things. The green and yellow buttons represent the targets that are on switches. And for those of you who don't know, a green target means that the switch is lined for the lead. When you see a yellow, that means that it is lined for the track. Though don't use that as a positive identification for the lead. Look at the switch to be sure. Though the next bit is the different buttons. These white and red buttons represent cars that we'll be working on. And we'll also be using these blue buttons for representing our blue flags. So what we're going to do here is our basic track. You've been assigned to work these bunch of cars, and this is the situation. So you'll notice that this end is lined properly. We will apply a lock to that, and we'll apply a blue flag. Then on the other end, the other person has to be sure that he lines, locks, and checks this switch, and also will apply a blue flag. So now you are positively protected, but before you commence work, you must communicate that your end is up and receive confirmation that the other end is also applied. Then you can work this cut of cars. Okay, now that we've covered the basic track, we're going to get a little more complicated. Now in this case, we are going to add a cut of cars to track 4. So we have 2 crews working on these 2 tracks. Now, how are we going to have positive protection for these workers? The idea is before we had this track lined and locked to protect these cut of cars, but that would allow a car to come down the lead and in to track 4, and we're not positively protected. So how do you do both tracks at the same time? And we do that by going high, sometimes they call it. You come up here and you line, lock, and check track 2 so that a car coming in will then be placed into track 2 and free of our area there. You also have to apply the blue signal flag to the lead. So now they know when they're coming down that there is work being performed in these lower tracks. So we're protected on this end. The next bit is we have to go to the other end, and it's the same idea here. We're not protected at this moment, so we have to line, lock, and check track 2 to ensure that the cars are sent into track 2 and not down into where we're working. Next, we apply a blue flag at that point. So we are now protected, and we would communicate to all people involved, making sure that everybody knows the protection is up, and we'd commence work. Now in this scenario, before we drop the flags, we have to ensure that both crews are done before we do that. Okay, so now we're going to add another layer of complication. We've just been given track 3. They backed in these cars and have given us the track to work. What's going to be the extra layer of complication is we're going to add a couple of crossovers. So we have a crossover here, and we have another crossover that is going into the side of the trains or cars we're going to work. So how do we go about actively, positively protecting these cars? Just like the other ones, we start off with one end and make sure that our switch is line locked and checked for the lead. We will make sure that the car, if it came down, is not going to go into the track that we're working. The other side, the same thing. We want to make sure that it is line locked and checked for the lead. No cars can enter from that end either. Of course, we need blue flags. We'll put our blue flag on each end. And now we're ready to work, right? No, we're not. We're still not positively protected. A car could still enter our area of work. It could come down this lead, cross over into 2, through the crossover again, and into our train. So we are not positively protected. So what do we do about it? Well, we go up to the switches and make sure that each one of these switches are, at least this one, is lined, locked, and checked against the crossover, so it's just going down track 2. And same with this one. Make sure that it's lined for track 2 and not the crossover. And when you're working in the States, there is an extra requirement because this switch provides access to these cars. That means that the car can be coupled into. That's why we're locking this, but we also are required to put a blue flag at or near the switch of that crossover. So now, when you look at it, are we positively protected? Is it possible for any car to get into us through any switch? And if the answer is no, which it looks to be, we are ready to work. So now the next step would be communicating with the people on your team and commence your work. Now we've covered several situations that you may see out in your facility, though some of them may be more complicated. So I'm challenging you to look at your facility and map them out. If you can draw a diagram like this, do so. Make sure everybody understands how to apply protection that gives them that positive protection, that they're not going to get themselves into trouble.